I'm so excited. The opening has started, and this is about max capacity, really, with a 20 square metre gallery, but it's full of surprises, and I think it's one of the best shows we've had because it sort of penetrates the Ern Malley myth in new ways by having brought Ern's sister Ethel into the picture and declaring her as the author. It shifts the reading of the poems considerably, and I've also had the benefit of a huge local contribution from painters hereabouts in Maitland and Morpeth. So as you would see when you look at the works, there are some really fresh interpretations. So we have one of Ethel's house in East Maitland. We have new Garry Sheads, which show Ern and Ethel in a new way. I'm not sure quite what Ethel is doing with the fallen angel over there when you get to it. But Ethel has come out as well as with the signed pages of the book that Nolan did, which wrongly attribute all of these to Ern. She finally has got her own moment, as you'll hear me speak of in a minute. Okay, so thank you very much for coming along and joining in. And I'm just going to try and give a few perspectives on Ern and Ethel Malley and why we should be interested, or not, in this early part of the 21st century in something that happened, after all, almost 80 years ago. I thought I'd actually begin just by pointing out these paintings. I'm not going to try to explain these paintings because I think paintings have a certain relationship with their audience. You literally make up your own mind, your own heart about particular paintings that respond to you or don't. But I want to say how exciting it is to have artists who live in Maitland and Morpeth who've done work specially for this show, and that includes Andrew Bennett. And this is a good place to start because here we see a repainting of Nolan's supposed portrait of Ern Malley, which was actually done 30 years later. It was done in 1974, I think. So 31 years later, he comes up with this depiction of himself as the sort of psychotic soldier, Ern supposedly with goiter on his neck and suffering and dying from Graves' disease mysteriously at the age of 25. Here we have Harold Stewart and James Macaulay. I know some people here know this story backwards, but if you'll pardon me, I'll just fill a few things in that for others who might not be so familiar. These are the two hoaxers intending to cause damage to angry penguins, and damage in particular to Max Harris. You have to bear in mind that everybody is in their early 20s. So, as you know, these two hoaxers invent the poems, or write the poems. They claimed to do it in one day, which is completely ridiculous. It would have taken weeks. And for a start, the first poem which was sent to trick angry penguins was Dura 1495, isn't it? Innsbruck, which was actually a poem that James Macaulay had written in all seriousness when he was a symbolist, following the French symbolists. In fact, he did a master's degree, or was it honours, I can't remember, on that subject. So he knew all about Mallarmé and Baudelaire and Rimbaud. So he was in that model, but he then completely rejected it. So he sent that poem, he and Harold deciding to do this, to the magazine going, do you like this? It's by this, Ethel writes, this, my dead brother, he's done a few poems. Are you interested? So it's a bloody good poem. And so, of course, the bait is there. Then more comes. Ethel is asked to explain more about her brother's life, and she does this. She explains how he did a bit of clock repair work. He was a bit of a part-time mechanic, but it was all rather mysterious. He might have had a bit of a love interest with somebody in Melbourne. And I think there's a postcard that turns up that's all a bit suspicious. It's very detailed and very believable. But they were not sure, and they sent a private detective to the address, 40 Dalmar Street, Croydon, in Sydney. But unfortunately, the detective thought it was number 14. And so a probably quite expensive report came back that no Ern Malley had been heard of at number 14. So they had said number 40, which was in fact Harold Stewart's sister's house. And if the detective had knocked, maybe something would have come out. But so we have this depiction of the hoaxes. I'll say more about Nolan in a minute. Garry Shead, there's an article here from 2004, I think it is, when he did a lot of this work. And of course, here we have all sorts of Shead specials. We have a marvellous hardback, which has individual drawings in the front. We have the sudden reissue of the Darkening Ecliptic from E.T. Press, which is Tom Thompson's, with a photograph of Ethel Malley in East Maitland included, with the poems co-credited to Ethel and Ern. So this is a new step. So Garry has done 6 new interpretations of this story. I think he's taken on board a little bit of what I was talking to him about, which was the remember the war. So he has planes on fire or shooting something. The building seems to be afire. As always with Garry, it's sort of lyrical, a bit mysterious, whimsical. Here we have, I'm not quite sure if this is Ethel or the Muse about to get up to something with the fallen angel. But I want to thank Stephen Hobbs here for doing a beautiful hang there. I think that the way they're positioned is just gorgeous, quite hard to do. And also with the eye lines, which have been meticulously set. Here we have another artist from Morpeth. This is Duncan Harty, who's done a very elaborately detailed picture, including the bulging eyes of the determined disease, and some little icon here, which is in honour of Ern. We have James Willebrandt has found Ethel's house, I think in Hinton Street. Do you remember the number, James? The number of 15? Okay, thank you. Because it looks like Ethel did move there, probably in the late 60s, early 70s, when I'm quite sure. But James has given this his unique treatment. But, it's a very fine piece popping from the wall. We have Gary Willis's work here, an artist based in Melbourne, though for many years in London. He was living at the Boyd's house for 10 years there. So he had some, interest from them. And he has done interpretations of poems by Ronnith Morris, a woman he met who has herself written a whole suite of Malley-influenced poems. So he's responded in an ekphrastic manner to these. And you can read the poems here, which relate, you can see in each case how he responded to it. People who are interested in the Malley hoax might well, like me, have become collectors, because you can buy the different versions of the book which Max Harris published, keeping it alive. Max, who had been brutally treated, who was sent to court charged with obscenity. This was all to cause damage. It was malicious. Yes, Max has an article there where he talks about how he believed that there must be an Ern Malley in every city. Somebody capable of brilliant work, writing brilliant things or doing brilliant things, who just disappears and is not known. And, except for his sister finding the poems under the bed, it would have never happened. This is how seriously Angry Penguins took the poems, publishing a special edition with a cover by Sidney Nolan. It's 1944 by the time this comes out. Ern dies in 1943. So, it's commemorating the Australian poet Ern Malley. So this is big time. So the poems are all here in nice big type, double-spaced. This one even has an errata slip, which is precious. Interestingly, I think there's an article on Surrealism Cannot Be Art by somebody. There's one on Aboriginal art. So this is during the war. Has Aboriginal art a future? Well, the answer is yes.
There you go.
It says, very prophetic. There's poems by Max Harris and elegiac for Ern Malley. Now, the terrible thing is that all the other poems in here, apart from the Malley poems, are probably unpublishable today. I think if you sent them to any range of magazines, you'd find you got a thanks but no thanks note back. Whereas the Malley poems retain their interest. And I will read a little bit from some of them in a minute. But I've put here too, this is a Jindawarrabak publication. That was a part of what the Angry Penguins were reacting against. This was one possible approach to Australian poetry where you would take Aboriginal mythology on board, you would get really into some Aboriginal place names and try to understand the ancient Australia and bring it into the present. The Angry Penguins hated all this stuff and were reacting against it, really bringing modernism. There's a book of Max Harris's A Window at Night, unfortunately not nearly as good as Ern Malley. There's the Darkening Ecliptic, which we'll come to in a minute, which is a book published in 1974 with Nolan's drawings. And by the way, the whereabouts of these drawings is unknown. I checked with his Australian and British dealers direct, and nobody has any idea where these are. So in a sense, this is it. And so when a copy of this book was found in Lifeline in a slightly dissembled condition, and miraculously, Ethel had claimed ownership of these poems. It seemed like she might well have been preparing for an exhibition such as this. We do have a card which has been done where Ethel, of course, is knowing, as she did, Ern very well, her dear brother, who did work here, as Ida has pointed out. Ida Halliday, another artist based in the local area from Morpeth. I'm jumping ahead now a little bit, but Ida has probably a detective's photograph following on from the fracas, where later in life in the 70s, Ern has been spotted working late at night and at a mechanics business under an assumed name. I'll come to more of that in a moment, but of course, Ethel had to point out this is not Ern. This is actually Sidney Nolan. For a start, there's a hat. He's wearing a soldier's hat. Now, Sidney Nolan was working in the Wimmera, guarding food supplies, right? But do you have one of the? What's it? One of these? Oh, thank you. But I sort of took the trouble to make a little display for my father, and that's on the back of that program. There's a photograph, the original and blown up, showing Michael Tipping standing under his Beaufort fighter. These are pretty mean machines. It's like flying a great big motorbike with 4 machine guns on the front and a whole lot of cannons and bombs and etc. My dad was the signaller, which meant also being the navigator and bomb thrower and etc. This is pretty hardcore stuff, 4 years of it. So at the same time that they're arguing about the nature of poetry, my father and many people like him are up there literally fighting the war on a very direct level. And I mean, I think it does bring it home when you have a bayonet. Like this is a Japanese bayonet from the Kokoda Trail, and it's been hand sharpened. You wouldn't want to go up against this. Then again, you wouldn't want to go up against a bowfighter either. But I don't put this with any opinion. They're complicated times, but it adds to the interest of this whole story. And we are only interested because the poems are so good. That's the whole point. But I just wanted to sort of balance this sense of, it's just poetry with a moment of the times. And the only reference to the Pacific War in the Darkening Ecliptic seems to be the scrub typhus of Mubo in the final poem, Petty Testament. The Battle of Mubo was fought in New Guinea between April and July 1943 by Australian forces in the defence of Singapore. And Ern Malley died soon after, on the 23rd of July 1943. So that shows you how, to the time, these poems are. And I just have a little note here that although Sidney Nolan deserted from the army in 1944 when facing transfer from Wimmera to the front line, A psychiatrist had noted that quote, Corporal Nolan has an overwhelming ambition, such as I have rarely struck before, to avoid frontline duty. He is, in my opinion, physically and mentally equipped for combat duties. At this point, Nolan disappeared, and he couldn't reveal his whereabouts until 3 years after the end of the war, when a amnesty was declared for deserters. But this was all apparently ignored when he was knighted in 1981. He did quote from Malley several times a phrase he liked, "What would you have me do? Go to the wars?" And it's worth noting too that Macaulay and Stewart were rescued from frontline duty by a high officer who brought them into intelligence, where they could spend their time during the war inventing Ern Malley. And as a very personal note on that, I would not have been born, except that my mother's fiancé was a pilot up against the first waves of Japanese attacks and was shot down. And she subsequently became engaged to another airman, my father, and here we go. And interestingly, Michael did become friendly with Max Harris, and he liked going to Mary Martin's bookshop, where he lived in Adelaide, and bought some antiques from there, including a 250,000-year-old Acheulean hand axe. It's pre-Homo sapiens, but anyway, which so I'm just saying that about it, sort of giving a different perspective. We also do have the big version of this shed, which if anybody would like to see it, David Musgrave knows this book well. Just going now over to an astonishing thing that's happened is that I managed to get a contribution from TT.O, a poet very well known in Melbourne. And this is a alternative cover compared to how it came out. And I strongly recommend this book. It's a big read. It'll probably take you a year to read it. But it's all broken into all of the sections of people who are around that story, because we're talking about Heide, what's now Heide Museum of Modern Art. We're talking not just about Sidney Nolan, but Albert Tucker, of course, and he and Joy Hester having a son who was adopted by John and Sunday, and many other painters there as well, when it was just there were cow paddocks on the edge of Melbourne. But TT.O has managed, I think, to summate some things very poignantly here, where so I'm having to go to page 410 here. Ern Malley, 1918 to 43. To be born in an idle moment, to be born as a foil, to come to life on a smirk and a smile, to come alive on a scroll of paper on Einstein's birthday, wrinkled, faded, drawn in pencil, almost crayon, to be raised up to a height of pretension, to be made an apparition, a visionary, to be ridiculed, to look bug-eyed into a soup of gobbledygook and be laughed at, to be given a disease to die from and a cemetery to be buried in, to report on the status of drainage and the breeding ground of mosquitoes. Those are some of the sources of the Ern Malley poems, of course. To be a barometer that can't tell a baboon from a monkey, a postcard with a rusty pin mark, to be given a battered suitcase, a mechanic's hands, a salesman's pinstripes, to be pastiched, to be given a rabbit's foot of hope but no future, to be given 424 lines of poetry for a lifetime of struggle and no prose to speak of, to have been deliberately mistyped, rubbed over, stained with coffee cups, and left to fade in an army barracks, read out aloud and laughed at, then killed off for the sake of a faithful sister, straight out of a Jane Austen novel or a Popeye cartoon, for all her care and kindness made to look naive, foolish, stupid and silly, to be the only mourner at the funeral, to be loaded up and over with spelling errors for the pleasure of a snigger, to blow to smithereens the hopes and struggles of a future generation, to nail those bastards out at Heide. This hollow man with a hollow body still stalked the streets of Melbourne, Fitzroy and Collingwood, where the children still pick their noses with their left hand and draw circles on the footpath. In 1942, there was widespread poverty. A river of text flows down the screen. More tomorrow. So we have we have this cover, which is a marvellous thing, I think. Here we have Emma Kidd, who in 2008 did interpretations of poems in her quite unique style, hand screen printed. And of course, we have a very famous one, which is John Tranter. This is John Tranter's poster of the movie, the Ern Malley story, which claims that it stars Dennis Hopper, the searing tale of a young man's of passion and the women who loved him all too well. Based on the stage hit, The Darkening Triptych. See him starve in his lonely garret for the love of poetry and a beautiful woman. When he runs out of ink, he writes in his own blood. So that's another kind of take on the story. And you can actually find that on Jacket magazine and download it yourself if you want to. Ethel has written to her sister, Margaret Mary, from 15 Hinder Street, East Maitland. The key thing here is that she says, I think that Ern's spirit has come to haunt me. I should never have passed my poems off as his. I knew it was the wrong thing to do. It's too late now to undo, of course. I would probably go to jail if they knew the truth. You are the only person on this earth who knows that the poems were mine. And maybe one day, when I'm gone, you can finally let them know. So this is marvellous. And of course, I think that this comes with the letter, does it not?
Yes.
As an absolute bargain price, which I won't go into. But that is definitely a keeper. So we're getting near to the endish. Here we have the dissembled copy, straight from Lifeline, as I mentioned. When it was taken apart, as you can imagine, because of the way in which those books are bound, they don't come as pairs. It's out of sync. And Ethel was very aware of that and has picked just the ones where the poem must be true to the picture, obviously, or it would be unreasonable to Nolan. So on the other side, there is two pictures and picture and text, but that would not be relevant. I've written the other side. Sorry, Ethel must have written that. No, but
What's it?
we have this marvelous Dave Delwitz and his jazz band, which I'll play a track of in a second. But as I've said probably several times, the only thing that keeps us going is that these poems sometimes peak into great interest. You can see, by the way, that the big change that Ethel has made here is it did say the word his. She's crossed that out and said her. Now out of life, permanent revenant, I assert, the caterpillar feet of these predictions lead nowhere. It is necessary to understand that a poet may not exist, that her writings are the incomplete circle and straight drop of a question mark. And yet I know I shall be raised up on the vertical banners of praise. And here in the last poem, Petit Testament, which is where I mentioned the scrubland of Mubo, is in the 25th year of my age, I find myself to be a dromedary. Time has run short of water between one oasis and the next mirage, and having despaired of ever making my obsessions intelligible, I am content at last to be the sole clerk of my metamorphoses. Begin here. In the year 1943, I resigned to all collateral images, reserving to myself a man's inalienable right to be sad at her own funeral. Ethel probably didn't quite get to that. She might yet. In the same year, I said to my love, who is living, dear, we shall never be that bird perched on the sole Arabian tree, never having learnt in our green age to forget the sins that flow between the hands and feet. Here the tree weeps gum tears, which are also real. I tell you, these things are real. Nolan loved that phrase, that whole line he repeated in painting because it was about he and Sunday read in the Menage a Trois. So I forced a parting, scrubbing my few dingy words to brightness. Where I have lived, the bedbug sleeps in the seam, the cockroach inhabits the crack, and the careful spider spins his aphorisms in the corner. I have heard them shout in the street, the chiliasms of the socialist Reich, and in the magazines I have read the popular front to back. But where I have lived, Spain weeps in the gutters of Footscray. Guernica is the ticking of the clock. The nightmare has become real, not as belief, but in the scrub typhus of Mouveau. It is something to be at last speaking, though in this no man's language, appropriate only to no man's land. Set this down too. I have pursued rhyme, image, and metre, known all the clefts in which the foot may stick, stumbled often, stammered, but in time the fading voice grows wise, and seizing the coordinate of all existence, traces the inevitable graph, and in conclusion there is a moment when the pelvis explodes like a grenade. I, who have lived in the shadow of each act, casts on the next act, now emerge as the thistle that in session puffs its full seed into the indicative air. I have split the infinitive. Beyond is anything. Thank you. Thanks for listening all that time. I've read it longer. I think we need to put that aircon on cool.
Yeah, open the door again.
Yes, open the door. Thanks for listening. It's great. It was lovely having you. Let's drink some more. And
Are you ready?
we can do more cheese. Thank you.
Thank you.